For centuries, writers honed their crafts through self-study, mentorship, and often in isolation. Some of the best writers that we know, like Najib Mahfoud, Hemingway, Virginia Woolf, didn't even have writing degrees. There were no structure or structured paths in becoming an author. Fast forward to today, things have changed. Now there are over 350 MFA programs or Masters in Fine Arts in creative writing across the United States, with thousands of applications each year, an average cost of 2-year programs, and some of them are 3, that ranges from $20,000 to $100,000. But does an MFA really teaches you how to become a writer? Is it worth the investment? And what does it actually teaches you if you become or join one of these programs? I enrolled in one of these MFA programs, and in this video, I want to share everything I learned during my time in the MFA program, what worked, what didn't work, and how joining the MFA program shaped my journey as a writer. So whether you are considering applying to an MFA program or you just curious about the experience, this will give you an insight to help you decide if an MFA is a right next step for you. Hi friends, my name is Mohammed and I'm a writer, and in this channel we demystify the writing process, review books, and explore habits and tools to help busy people fulfill their creative dreams. So today I want to talk about a few things. One, the structure of my MFA program. What did the program look like from week to week or from semester to semester? What worked for me? Basically the things that I learned I enjoyed in the MFA program, what didn't work for me, or the things that I didn't like or wished that they were there in hindsight, and finally what I actually learned or walked away with. This will help you make a decision whether an MFA is a good next step for you or not, so that you don't have to spend all the money and the time that you will, imprison yourself with if you get to enroll in an MFA program. So let's start with the basics. What does an MFA program look like? First, the common denominator across all MFA programs, no matter how long or how short they are, 2-year or 3-year, they all have workshops, which is the center of an MFA program, because what it argues is that if you share your work with others and talk about it in groups, you will learn from other people's or critiquing other people's work, but you will also learn from the feedback that other people give you. And what does workshop look like? For me, it was we met every week and we read 2 stories and gave side commentary or anecdotes on just the margins of the papers, but also had to write a letter, a 1-pager describing the story, what worked, what didn't work, the center emotional of the story. And then what you end up with is a lot of comments from a lot of people. For my particular group, we were 12 students in total, 6 first year and 6 second year. For a lot of other programs are much larger, and I think there are programs that are so big that they have to actually break workshops into multiple classes. I'm not sure what is the maximum number or the most amount of number that could work for a workshop to be in a group, but I think the smaller the better. Even now when I share my work with my friends who are the cohort that I was enrolled with, so 6 people, I feel much better when they are giving me feedback because it's a smaller group than we were the 12 of the first year and second year during my MFA program. And to be honest, I've seen a lot of things during workshop. I've seen people enjoy it, and I certainly did, and I learned so much, especially the first year. I felt like, when you start going to the gym, the first few months, you see the most amount of changes in your body. And for me, that's what it felt like. The first year that I attended workshop, there was so much that I learned about my own writing, how people perceived it, and also about how to read other people's writing with an analytical eye. But I've also witnessed people walk out of the classroom because of the critiques or feedback that other people, and I've seen even people cry. It is not easy to write stories because you have to be vulnerable, and sometimes they reveal a lot of the things that you experience in your personal life, even though they are fiction. And as writers, we feel so attached to the work that we do because we spend so much time just going line by line, and we have certain expectations of how people will perceive it, and then the way people talk about it, and sometimes it's not even the critique, but how the critique is being delivered or the feedback is being delivered is what matters more than anything. And a side anecdote, if you are giving feedback to a friend about a piece of writing, and this is something I learned the hard way because I did it the wrong way and I offended and I hurt people in the beginning, is that first you sandwich it basically. First, you begin with something very, very good. You you begin with the things that you enjoyed about the piece of writing, the story, the article, whatever that you are giving feedback to. And then in the middle, you give the critique. You tell the friend or the writer what they should fix, or what you found dull, what you didn't connect with, where it was boring, or what didn't resonate with you. And then you end it with a comment that is positive. So you sandwich the negativity so that it doesn't feel on the other side, or the person who is listening to you as an attack, because it often does feel like you are attacking the person themselves, and they're not detached from their work, because the work is a piece of them. And that's what writers feel. We feel like this is why you hear a lot of writers, when they talk about a novel that they worked on for many years, that they will refer to it, this is my baby. Whether that's accurate or not, whether that's lame or not, it doesn't matter. But then this is how some people will feel about it, because they spend so much time working on this piece of art. Some of the other classes that I had to take part of the structure of the MFA program is literature courses or literature class. And this is a class where you read literature. Some of them are like classical literature. There was a class about the literature of death. And then what I took was the most course that I enjoyed was the Russian literature course, and we short stories by Chekhov, and we read Gogol and a bunch of other Russian writers, which I enjoyed so much because I've never read any of Russian literature, and the translated work was just amazing. And then it was the second or the third semester, I took a class called Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce. It was literally the whole class for 3 months. We read Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce. And if you have not, or you have no idea what I'm talking about, I literally want you to do this. I want you to look it up. Maybe look up the first page and try to read it out loud. If you're familiar with James Joyce, you probably know his book Ulysses, the baby of Finnegan's Wake. The Finnegan's Wake is the second iteration, or the promoted version of what Ulysses was. If you think, or you have encountered what Ulysses sounds like or reads like, then Finnegan's Wake is just, Ulysses squared. Now, did I suffer through the course? Yes, I did. Do I regret it now? No, I'm glad that I went through it. Now I get to tell people that I read Finnegan's Wake, although none of my friends who are engineers and doctors and lawyers actually get to appreciate that achievement. And after taking that course, I was so proud of myself. I thought, this is worthy of putting it on my resume. The third course that I took as part of my program was craft, and it's structured different depending on the professor. So this is a course where you get to learn everything craft. So character building, setting, language, environment, tone, voice, and everything that has to do with craft. And each professor approaches it different. So one professor of mine, or teacher of mine, approached in a way where we read a story and then we talked about it. It's almost like a workshop, but we're not workshopping each other's work, but we're workshopping other people's story, and then we are telling or exploring whether it's what's working about the story and what's not working. And there were times where we did homework or wrote based on prompts. So a professor of mine was a big fan of the 3 a.m. Epiphany, which is basically a book just full of writing prompts that are very detailed. I'm not talking about the $5 book that you buy from 5 and Below that gives you writing prompts. No, these are prompts that are very loaded, very specific, very thought through, where you talk about a character, for example, who woke up the next day after a family member died and is looking outside the window and it's sunny. What does he or she sees? Or take that same character and write a prompt about them waking up the next day, but they're happy. Maybe the night before they won a game or an award, and now they're waking up. What do they see when they look outside that window in the same weather? And finally, and this wasn't a course, but rather a requirement, which is at the end of the second year, you have to submit a thesis. So instead of the class, you had to meet with the teacher, the professor outside or in scheduled time, so that you can talk about your thesis. For me, in fiction, it was 75 pages minimum. This could be an excerpt from a novel or a bunch of collected short stories. I can't remember what the poetry students did, but I assume that it was a collection of poems. Can't remember the number or the pages. But at the end of the day, or the point is that you are collecting the work that you worked on in the past 2 years, but also work that that were outside the 2 years, because 75 pages are way more than the stories that you will submit in workshop. So as you can see, the structure is intense. So you are constantly writing, you are constantly reading other people's work, you are constantly reading and analyzing published authors, classical authors that have their books well known and have been admired for specific things. So you are in that mode of like just learning and drowning in writing craft and character, and it's wonderful and you can learn so much. And this is why I want to go into what worked for me during my MFA program. For me, what I found the most helpful is the reason that I applied for an MFA program in the first place, which is the community of writers that I became a part of. As some of you might know, I migrated, or I moved to the United States when I was 13, and I did not know English. Like, I literally learned it from scratch. I was in high school and it wasn't easy. And I come from an immigrant background, so my parents and my community and my circle of friends are mostly geared towards engineering, medicine, or law. Anything outside of that, they have no resources to provide you or help you with, but encouragements if they are sound enough. But for most of them, the arts or drawing or writing isn't something in their vocabulary. I remember after I enrolled in the MFA program, I sat in the car with my dad and I was talking to him about, how I just got accepted to this program and I was excited about it. And I spent maybe like 20 minutes explaining to him what an MFA is. And at the end of my long-winded presentation, he asked me the ultimate immigrant question: how much money will it make you? And in that moment, I could have felt sad. I'm like, you don't understand me, but I didn't, because he's my dad, but also because I know it's not in his vocabulary. MFAs in general just started becoming part of our vocabulary, and we are passionate about the thing. Imagine people who don't even value it, or it is not even part of their worldview. And in that moment, I had reached an understanding between my dad and I that I did not sort of realize, and I saw before, but I did not appreciate it at that very moment, which is, yes, there are these things, there are these goals that I have that you might not see, and the only way for him to be able to understand it if there is a number attached to it. And so if I tell him, I can make $500,000 from writing a book, then I am sure he will appreciate it very much, but I don't want to build that expectation. Anyway, so you enroll in the program and you have a community of writers that encourage you, that say all these good things about your writing, and trust me, it does not repeat itself. Especially in the beginning stages, if you are just starting to write and starting to take it seriously, what you really need is consistency, a writing routine, and you need people to cheer you up, because it's hard, it's very difficult to just keep at it for a very, very long time. And writing are projects that are like 5-10 year projects. They're not something that you can do and be rewarded for in weeks time or in days time. You need longevity, and you need people in your circle to cheer you up and to push you to keep going. The other thing that worked for me during the MFA program is the structured and the accountability to write. I wrote during the MFA program in those 2 years more than I've ever written in the past 10 years. And it wasn't just because I was required to submit. That was part of it. But I was just in that mode, because seeing other people submit their work and me having to submit my work in, whatever deadline that's coming, I was in that mode of like, I just have to keep writing. And I would find the time to write no matter what. In my second year, I became a father. So my daughter was born, now she's 3. My daughter was born during my second year, and I still managed to find time to write. Like I would sometimes wake up very, very early before my wife or my daughter would wake up and write for an hour, or sometimes I would push it all the way at the later part of the night and right before I slept. So I would always find the time, because I felt like it was a responsibility that I had to. For that very specific day, I had to write. And of course, we're not perfect. No one is. There were days that I didn't write. But just when looking back at those 2 years, I was the most consistent with my writing routine. And the last thing is feedback. Feedback, or receiving feedback, hearing other people talk about your work, hearing other people analyzing your work, helps you not only know what's not working about your story or your writing, but also how people are perceiving it and what's working. So for a very long time, I would write and nobody read my work except my wife, and I did not know except her perspective. But when my writer friends, critique my work, gave feedback, I realized that my style of writing was very different than everybody else, because now I just have to compare myself to the people that I'm reading the work for and giving feedback for. But also they were pointing things that I just took for granted. So for example, I grew up in Yemen, and growing up there, I heard a lot of stories from my mom, especially during electric outages, what they would do when the electricity was out. We will gather around an adult, mostly my mom, and she would tell us stories about her growing up in the village of men with missing limbs or jinn, and all of these stories that were beautiful at the time and scary, and all the things that you would expect to hear from someone who lived in the village. So growing up in that environment made my writing has a little flavor of tale. So it has a once upon a time sort of energy to it. Now, it's not something that I do intentionally. It's something that seeps into my writing, but I never saw it or I never recognized it until other people asked me about it or pointed it out to me. And in the beginning, I tried to sort of change it and resist it, because I'm like, I don't want to write tales. I want to write more like modern, more like Hemingway and all the other writers that I admire. But later on, I just accepted it because this is who I am as a writer, and I needed to embrace my style of writing rather than pushing it and doing or imitating other people's writing, because at the end of the day, we have to find our own voice. And I remember one of my cohort friends at the time, at the very, very last day of workshop, we went around and we shared what is the most valuable thing that we walked away with during our MFA program. This is the second year, and we had a great time together. And one of them said, which was the thing that hit home for me, was he said, I learned more during workshop from reading other people's work than people giving me feedback for my own work. And I thought that was so accurate, because when you are reading in workshop, you're not just reading people's work for fun. You're actually reading it to give them feedback. So you are analyzing the text. The intention is to make this piece better, not critiquing it just because you want to say something during workshop, but you are thinking, where can this piece get to the next level? So those are the things that worked for me. But what didn't work for me during my MFA program, or what did I wish I learned or experienced that I didn't get to experience? And first is, there was so much focus on the writing and nothing about career and publishing. And look, there are other programs who do the exact opposite, which I think is worse. I would rather just spend all the time on the writing piece. But here is my thing. First week during the MFA program, one of our workshop professors or teachers said that this program is set up to make you a better writer, not a better author. And what that meant was, here we just focus on 2 years of intense writing, so that you can walk away with a routine, you can walk away with the habit, you can walk away with the passion of just keep writing. They did not talk about publishing. I think it was until the program director was switched that we got, at the very last semester, we get to meet I think an editor in one of the New York City publishing houses. Other than that, there was not even tips about where to submit, how to get even short stories published, or how to get novels published, how to find editors, how to find agents, or any of those career guidance. And I wish there was just a little bit of just that, just giving tips on how to publish short stories, where to publish them. Is there maybe a list? And an MFA program can do this, can just accumulate a list of magazines, of editors, of agencies that writers can just reach out to of their own. They don't have to make the connection, but they were just focused on the writing. The other thing that didn't work, and this is not for me, is more of a critique on the MFA programs as a whole, is that they cost a lot of money. At least some of them do. So there are programs that cost as low as $20,000 for 2 years, and there are some of them in Ivy League schools like NYU and Columbia that can cost, and don't quote me on this, but I know programs, and I've looked it up when I was there before I applied, that can cost up to $100,000. Why? For an MFA program. Why? And the critique here isn't that they're just expensive. They are expensive and there is very little return. When you get an MFA degree, it's not something that you can, market. It's not like people are gonna hire you as, a writer in a magazine. I mean, maybe they will, but that doesn't even pay. If you want to become a professor or an adjunct professor at a college, you'll make pennies on the dollar in order for you to just live. I'm making way more money now as a creative director. I do a lot of video work in New York City than most people with PhDs in creative writing. But, and maybe this is something I should have put on what worked for me during my MFA program, is that I received a scholarship that paid for all of my tuition. Now, I was lucky because I resided in New York City. I got accepted to a very, very specific program. And if you're curious, it was MFA Hunter College. It's a CUNY school. And it's not like one of the most prestigious program, but when I saw that it was tuition free for those who resided in New York City, then I applied for it. And the crazy part about this is that the year that I decided to apply for the MFA program, I only applied to that one because just of my life setup. I only could have worked if I got accepted to the MFA program, because first, I was not willing to pay for it. Second, it had to be in New York City because I was already married and I wanted to settle in New York City, and there was no way for me to move out of state. And those are the basic two criteria. So it worked for me. That's the only program I applied to, and I got accepted. I got lucky. But if someone comes and asks me now, in hindsight, knowing what an MFA program can offer you, would you go back, and if you didn't get accepted to a Hunter College, would you pay for it elsewhere? I would say no. What I would do, I would take the money saved up that I have, and instead of, go into debt to get an MFA from, a regular college, take that money and just take a bunch of writing courses. These can be in, magazines. I mean, there's a bunch of courses that are online that you can just take about craft, workshop, everything else. And just, look for ones that resonate with you. Look for ones that speak your sort of writing style, and just apply to them, pay for them and take them, and you will get the same amount of benefit. And you will meet people there that you can develop relationships with, and you can become writing friends with. And MFAs is not the only way to become a writer. There is no way to become a writer. There is no specific path. So if money is part of your equation, if you are a parent and you cannot dedicate going back to school, or if you work full time and the program does not accommodate for it, then don't shape your life around it. Figure out other ways to gain the skills that you are in need of. And to be honest, all you need as to become a better writer, because that's the goal of an MFA, is not guaranteeing you to become a published author, is a writing habit and a group of people that you can share your writing with, and just believe. You just have to believe that you can do it. And day in and day out, write every day. The more you write, the closer you get to that end goal. So next up is what I actually learned after 2 years of MFA program. First, discipline. I learned that discipline is way more important than the story, the writing, and everything around it. If you are disciplined enough to write as consistent as possible, then all of these other things will come by time. You will write better stories. The stories that you are writing will become better, and you will learn more about yourself as a writer than just reflecting on it. So write. Second is the value of revision. And this happened to me in the first semester. I learned a lesson that I will never forget. I was struggling with a story, and it's actually the story that I submitted as a writing sample to the MFA program before I got accepted. I was working on the story, I submitted it, and people just butchered it. It was a horrible story. I think it was 25 pages. It was too long and it was dragging and it was just not working. And people gave me feedback, and my writing teacher for that workshop asked me to revise it and submit it again for that same semester, not to submit a different story. So I had a few weeks to revise it, and I tried to revise it and I couldn't. It was just, I did not know where to approach it. There were too many comments that people gave me. I tried to synthesize them. It was just hard. And what I did was I literally scratched the whole thing off and I started writing from scratch. I kept the parts that I thought were working, but essentially I rewrote the whole thing. And that taught me that real writing does not happen in the first draft of the story. It happens with the second, third, and fourth, and sometimes fifth draft, the more you revise it, the more you get closer to what the story is. And now there is an equation to it, or there is a science to it, or there's an art to it, if you may, that you're not just gonna keep revising forever. There is a point where you just have to stop, and you know when you have to stop. But this also means that you have to have the stamina to go back again and again and again to the same story. And the third important lesson I learned is writing is very, very personal. And this might seem like, oh, but we all know that. Who doesn't know that writing is personal? But there's a moment where I just realized that what I'm writing isn't just fiction. It's not about creating a world that doesn't exist or creating characters that doesn't exist. What it's really about for me when it comes to fiction specifically is that I have minimized my limitations, or basically broke all my limitations of factual limitations to create a world to communicate ideas. And that's liberating in the purest form, because I'm not bound into creating or writing about myself as a character, and I have to be the character that I am also in real life. But I can write about parts of myself in a character without having to say that he's Arab, or he is from Yemen, or he's anything else that does not represent the real me. Then the real question begs itself: is it worth it to get in an MFA? And for me it was, and here is why. When I was writing on my own, I did not have any guidance, and maybe if I took more craft classes, because my MFA experience was the first experience I got to sit with other writers or get to know a writer, or even get to be in a craft class or literature class. I did not even before that know that there were workshops that I could pay for, craft classes that I could have paid for, or anything else. And that's because of the access that I had. I come from a family, or I am an immigrant, then so like I have different type of access at the time when I was 20, 21, 22. Now if a writer friend come, or someone in my circle comes and asks me, oh, I want to be a writer, how do I do it? I will point them to, first thing, take a writing class, join a workshop, submit your work to magazines or something of that sort before getting into an MFA program. And a lot of the MFA friends that I had already taken classes before they got into the MFA, and they saw the value in them, and their thinking was MFA will be just that times 10. So for me, it gave me everything I needed: the community, the structure, the discipline, everything I needed at the time. It gave it to me. So if you're like me at the time and you do not have a community of friends that are writers, you do not write consistently, and you need someone who holds you accountable, and you want to push yourself beyond your comfort zone to become a writer, then an MFA might be the right thing, or the right next step for you. But when can an MFA be not worth it? I think one, like I said before, it shouldn't cost you a lot. You shouldn't go into a lot of debt for an MFA. That is tough, especially for an MFA. It doesn't translate well in the real world. Two, if you are seeking publications or becoming an author, an MFA will not do it for you. It doesn't promise you anything. It does not promise you a job. It does not promise you a career. It does not promise you getting published. It doesn't promise you a thing. It just promises that it will put you in spaces where there are a lot of passionate people who care about writing, care about reading, and who are willing to give you a piece of their mind about your work. And sometimes that's a beautiful experience, and sometimes it's horrifying, and it might hurt you. So you have to do your due diligence, you have to do your research, you have to do your internal reflection to know whether you are doing this for the sake of getting better as a writer, or to just getting published. And if it is because of getting published and becoming famous and rich, this is not the path. In the end, MFA or not, you can become a writer. It's not a sort of badge that you have to, or a milestone that you have to accomplish in order for you to walk through the threshold of calling yourself a writer. You are a writer whether you get an MFA or not. You are a writer whether you publish or not. You are a writer if you write and you call yourself one. It does not need other people's approval, and does not need a degree or a paper that is stacked somewhere that I don't even know where is mine. Writing is a journey, and becoming a writer is a journey. And some of us, publish in their 20s, some of us publish in their 30s, and some of us, it doesn't happen until their 50s. And who cares? As long as we are pushing ourselves beyond our comfort zone, we are honest with ourselves, and we are consistent with following this passion of ours, then whatever results that we get, we are thankful for, we are grateful for, because we have the luxury to take this as a passion of ours and not having to worry about, other basic needs like shelter. So if you are struggling with becoming a writer, then be grateful that this is your challenge. If you want to know more about my MFA experience, or you have questions that I did not answer, please drop them in the comments below. I would love to help. I would love to answer them and help you, figure out your next step in your writing career. And if you've watched this video this far, then you will enjoy my video here and a book that I read actually before my MFA, and then during, and then after, that will teach you 80% of what any MFA program will teach you. It's right here. Click and watch, and in the meantime, keep writing, and until next time.